Welcome, and bienvenidos. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Tech and Tequila. This is the podcast where everyday tech meets the blue agave fields and conversation flows as smoothly as the tequila that is in our glass, hopefully. I'm Kat Lopez Shelby, your guide through the fascinating world of tech. So I kind of debated this week, and I would call this going a little bit back to basics, but not quite basics. When I say that, obviously last week's episode, I talked about the AT&T breach and what that means. And I'm going to recap that very shortly. And basically, so AT&T had a breach. It's about 73 million points of data. What that means is that is people's names, addresses, emails, social security numbers. And I think at last, when I looked, it was like 63% of that was past customers, and the rest made up current existing customers. All their current existing customers have been notified already, and they've requested them to change their passwords and go through and do that. And they're in the process of notifying all their past customers. And the reason that I say this is kind of going back to basics. Now, first and foremost, because AT&T does have a very solid cybersecurity practice, I've used it with some of my clients. There are some of my clients, obviously I would say supplier, but they're an internet service provider as well, but they have a robust cybersecurity posture. And so this kind of goes back to where I talk about it's not only important that you have a robust cybersecurity posture or you have a cybersecurity posture at all, but the other thing is, so what do you do when things go left, when your tech is checking, when you discover, let's say you get a ransomware notice, like, do you know and do you have a plan of action for what to do? So let's go back to basics. First off, I want to talk about NIST and what it means and what that framework is. Secondly, I want to kind of give you some tips and tricks with a few little statistics in of ways to help protect your business. And for some of you that have listened to this, we've had Lumen on here talking about their cybersecurity practice. There's several other things that I've talked about, Coro, Exidium, different things. So it's not like this is completely new information, but I want to put it into just one thing where you think about it. So first off, let's talk about NIST in the essence of NIST was developed by the National Institute of Standards and Technology. Now, when we say NIST, so what does that mean? NIST cybersecurity framework is a set of guidelines and best practices designed to help organizations manage and reduce their risk. What does that mean? So basically that means is that they say, here's the things that you do. If you do these things, then, it's not 100%. I always say there's no entity that I know of that is absolutely 100%, nothing's ever going to get through, right? But the idea is that NIST's cybersecurity framework is structured around 5 core functions. And what are those? So that's identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover, right? Each of these have like subcategories. And, with that, each has, specific outcomes, security controls that can be applied. But what they're referencing is this is a map for you to follow, basically, or a set of guidelines to say, in order for us to do these things, here's what we need to do. Obviously, the idea of this framework is very flexible. It's very scalable. And depending on your business, depending on what regulatory and compliance requirements, depend on what really is required for your company. Everyone should have some type of cybersecurity posture, right? From the solo entrepreneur that is working out of their house, has an online business, to somebody that, an enterprise company. Obviously, we know that, we've seen that. But I'm going to give you 10 cybersecurity measures that can help implement or enhance your cybersecurity posture. One of them I talked about it last week. I know I've talked about it several times, and that is use strong passwords, and whenever possible, use multi-factor authentication. Now, you're going to say, why? What is the point? Well, first off, if, any John Smith person off the street can look at your Facebook and figure out your password is, your anniversary in your dog's name, that's not a strong password. Strong passwords include a mix of numbers and characters and, take out, instead of using an O, use a 0, like just a mix. Multi-factor authentication means when you log on, it's okay, so I put in my password, but now it says, all right, have you done this? And I think we've seen this, Office 365 users have multi-factor authentication. I'm trying to think of anything that doesn't. I use Canva. It has multi-factor authentication. Basically what it is it's a secondary verification system. The same thing goes, and I say this because I've had several customers over the past couple of months that have had incidents with their social media having issues. Nobody is going to ask you for that password, but that is not the same thing as when you call into like AT&T or Verizon and they say, okay, we're going to send you a text to verify you are who you are. But if someone from Facebook or, which I can kind of go into a little bit here, is saying, hey, I just sent you an MFA, what is it? And you haven't preemptively reached out. So real quickly, I'm going to go into this because this is something that this falls under what I call, and I want to say it is 82% of data breaches happen because of some type of human error. So let's say you are the person that manages your business's social media. You get some type of message and it's always going to have this like super fast call to action. And it's going to say, oh my God, you have to answer today or we're going to block everything and you're not going to be able to access it and you have violated the community rules. Well, first off, number one, take a breath, count to 3, breathe through it. Number 2, look to see what it says. Is that actually from Meta or does it say user 45, whatever? Because if it says that, just ignore it and move on. Okay, just ignore it, move on. We're not gonna do that. What I always say is verify before you send any type of information to anybody. And, that goes into what we call social engineering or phishing. That's, along these lines. So I think I've kind of killed that. Obviously, if you want to know more or you want to have a discussion, I definitely recommend scheduling a cybersecurity assessment with Shelby Technology Solutions or, a dark web analysis, any of the above. But the second thing is regularly update and patch systems. And we haven't seen this as much here recently, but anytime your computer needs an update or your printer needs an update or your phone needs an update, by all means, update these things. When I go into a business and I am talking to them about their firewall and they're like, and I ask, when was the last time you updated and patched your firewall? And they're looking at me like, what do you mean? Update? I thought we put that in and it's one and done. Now, some people have what's called a managed firewall, which means that maybe their MSP is managing it. But you still want to, I always say you want to trust but verify. So make sure all these things are happening like they're supposed to happen. If you have a cloud-based firewall, look and see, they're going to send you notification, whether it's, Perimeter 81 or Sophos or AT&T, whoever that firewall is through, you're going to get notifications saying, we are doing these patches on this days. We are doing this. And so that is there. The third thing you can do is install and maintain antivirus software. So what does that mean? It's not just good enough to put an antivirus software on your computer somewhere and just leave it and never worry about it. It kind of goes back to that updating. You want to make sure that once you install that, that software, that you are updating it, that you're maintaining it, that you're paying for it yearly if it's on an annual pay, that you're taking care of it. So one of the things that is the next step is firewalls and network security. And even if you're a solo entrepreneur at home, you want to think about, or maybe you have a small office, you want to think about deploying a firewall. There are several cloud-based firewalls that are extremely reasonable. And when I mean extremely reasonable, I mean super inexpensive for you, where it's going to control your incoming and outgoing network based on some traffic rules. The nice thing about a firewall is it's there to protect your network and devices. And when I say that, that means that if you have a cloud-based firewall or you have a managed firewall and it's getting updated on the regular, any known threats out there, they're putting additional software in. They're looking for those things so that you have that protection on there. Keep in mind that if someone gets on your network, someone gets into your system, they stay there, and I forgot the exact days, but it's like 3 to 6 months, can be longer, and just hang out on your network before there's actually any attack, any type of full out incident. Obviously you want to secure your Wi-Fi network. And this is a huge thing that I talk to people about. And for me, this is, okay, so let's say you are like a road warrior, you are a travel, you are like out and about. So what does that mean? Let's put some VPNs in for you, number one. Number two, and this one, people are like, you are paranoid. Never, ever, ever, ever plug your device into anything that you cannot control. So what does that mean? Yes, that means I'm telling you, don't even plug it into a charger, like into a USB charger or, the UC, whatever charger. The other thing is, when you go to like a Starbucks or you go to the hotel, when you go through and you sign their terms and conditions, you're basically saying if there is a cyber incident that gets leaned back to this, that it's not their fault, it's your fault. Okay. The same thing goes for your Wi-Fi network. And I say this for lots of people. And, if your employees are utilizing your Wi-Fi, that's great. But if you're letting people who are hanging out in your office use your Wi-Fi and it's like, I don't know, John Soprano from down the street who comes in periodically, and now John Soprano is giving that out to like 18 different people, make sure you create a guest Wi-Fi. People do not need to be on your network proper. And unfortunately, there are bad actors out there that will take advantage of that. Number 6, educate your employees on cybersecurity practices. What does that mean? That means, put some type of phishing simulation in that you control, where you can educate your employees. It's a way of training your employees. So there's like KnowBe4 is one that we utilize. I'm trying to think. Graphis, I think, is another one. But these are some great things that you can utilize. And why is this so important? And it goes back to that 82% thing. 82% of cyber incidents get linked back to human error. So if you are regularly conducting training sessions on cybersecurity best practices, how to recognize phishing attempts, safe internet habits, like don't use the Starbucks Wi-Fi, the importance of regular software updates, all of these things are going to help you in the long run. Data encryption, any type of information that is sensitive, you want to make sure you have double encryption. So I know with a lot of software, and because we work with companies in Latin America, that one of the big things is different, like text messaging apps, everything. Look at what encryption they use and how is the information encrypted. Is it encrypted over here and encrypted over here? Is it encrypted at rest? What is that? So why is this important? This makes it more difficult for attackers to access and understand the data, even if they manage to breach the system. Now, one of the things that wasn't above this, but something that I highly recommend to my clients, and I think it kind of goes, let's say with employees and cybersecurity practices, but install and maintain any software, kind of somewhere in there is, I do recommend using some type of email software that is just for your email, whether you decide to use Anthium, Coro, there's a couple more out there. The reason that I recommend this is, number one, it's going to cut down on your spam. So you're going to really love that. But number two, it's a lot easier for someone to call and say, hey, did you get that email? And you can go into any contained emails and look and see, oh, here it is. Let me push it through. And I use an example because we use a system like that. And I received a PDF from someone outside of my organization. So it automatically pulled it out and it didn't come through. It was very easy for me to go in, look at the things that it had pulled and contained and weren't there. Number 8 is back up data regularly. So why is this important? And I've had this happen with some of my customers. In fact, I had a customer a couple of years ago that actually was backing their data up. But there's a secondary thing to backing your data up. You want to make sure the data is, number one, getting backed up. You also want to decide within your business, can I go if my data isn't backed up for a week? Or do I need everything to be backed up multiple times a day? Is overnight? Like, what can your business tolerate? And the reason that I say this, I had a customer that had a ransomware incident and their information was locked. And they were like, oh, we're good. We have backups. But lo and behold, the thing was, it had not properly backed up the entirety of their information for a year. And it was too costly for them to lose all that information. As a side note, the other thing is, once you pay someone from ransom, your information is out there, and more than likely something similar is going to happen again. Just FYI. 9, have and implement some type of control-based access. This kind of, to me, kind of goes into like a zero trust network environment a little bit, but it's the idea that only certain people need to have access to certain systems, and sometimes that can just be for having internal bad actor situations. If for whatever reason you notice employee B, who has no reason being in your financial software, is hanging out in your financial software. First off, how did they get in and why are they there? But secondly, what kind of damage can they do? So your employees should only have access to the systems and software that they use on a regular basis. And I'm going to say this as a side note, and I think this goes back to strong passwords and multi-factor authentication was number one. But if one of your employees has all their passwords on a sticky note or written somewhere, then you need to have a discussion with them, because that's not working. The other thing is that if you are implementing role-based access control for your software and systems, and having employees who only need that using it, that is an open-ended thing where someone can get into that system and have something, just as FYI. So that to me is big. And finally, number 10, the best plan is to have one. Obviously, I think if this whole situation with AT&T, and I promise we're not going to talk about it on our next podcast, has taught us anything, I guarantee you AT&T had a plan. Hopefully people knew what to do, and it went into effect. But you have to develop and test whatever your incident response is. And what is that? And I say this as another thing, if you have any type of cybersecurity insurance, or you're like, oh, I have business insurance and my business insurance is going to cover this. A couple of the things that should be part of your incident plan is, what does it look like when you have an incident? So you're preparing for an incident, you're developing this plan, you're going to test and you're going to update the plan accordingly to say, hey, this didn't work, this did work. But the other thing is, you're going to put in there and say, okay, we have cyber insurance, or we need to notify our business insurance within such amount of time to have them pay and help. Because sometimes these people will pay. I have a customer that has a policy, and I think it's a $500,000 policy last time we talked. And one of the discussions that he had was, I need to know, with the solution that is being provided, if we have an incident, for them to pay, they have to be notified within 24 hours that we are aware of the incident. And we want to be aware as soon as possible, because we don't want to have any reason for them not to pay. Obviously, by implementing these measures, you're going to significantly reduce the risk of experiencing a cyber incident. If I had to pick, I don't think I can pick one thing. I can pick what I think you should start with. And so what I always say people should start with is looking at your network and figuring out, all right, where are my holes? Lots of people look at having a cyber assessment and they're like, this is way more expensive than I want to spend. Or, can you explain to me? But I can tell you right now, it's better to know where the holes are in your plan, in your system, because you can start patching those holes. And what I always tell people is, we can make you a Genesis or an Audi plan. And if we need to take this back to more like a Hyundai Honda and say, here's where we're going to start, let's start somewhere, start that plan. What does it look like? Let's make a plan. Let's say, okay, in a year, in 2 years, in 3 years. And one of the things that I've discovered with a lot of compliance and regulatory requirements, it's not that everything has to be implemented today. And don't get me wrong, I hope that we can get everything implemented. It's that you have to have a plan of action for implementation. That doesn't mean like, okay, I have nothing in place, but that means that if they come in and they say, okay, I want to see where you're at, where's your plan, you can do that. So on the cusp of this whole thing with AT&T, I wanted to talk about NIST, kind of what the backbone of that was. And I wanted to cover, 10 things that you can do for your business. These are quick hits. I know I've talked about it before, dark web analysis, a cyber, assessment, a network assessment. All of these things are worthwhile for your business, but that really covers most of it today. Hopefully we can all learn from other businesses' mistakes, things that they do. I tell everyone, check it out, read the articles. Once we get to the bottom of this, it's kind of like when you find out a breach happened and they're like, oh, we can link this back to someone having a poor password policy. Like they use, let's say the company is Wind Chimes 101 and everyone in their company used Wind Chimes 102 for their password. Well, obviously that's a password issue. A bunch of these things, there's a way to prevent them. I'm not, like I said, to my knowledge, there's no company that is 100% bulletproof that is never going to be affected, because there's not only your policy, there's the policy of the people that you interact and you work with, that work within your organization or, other companies, things to look at. But start somewhere, use the NIST cybersecurity framework as like a basis, and then look at these 10 things for your small and medium-sized business. What can I implement? What can I do today? And what can we do going forward? Food for thought, things to think about. I think an ounce of prevention is worth so much, and it will save you in the long run. That's all I have today, guys. I hope this was informative, gave you things to think about. I will soon have up on the website 3 pieces of free collateral you can go that's basically going to help you ask yourself these questions, look at your network and figure what you are. Feel free, go www.shelbyts.com, check it out, download it, start there. And then as always, reach out. But I want to thank you so much for joining us today. I hope that your tech is not being awful in teching. I hope you're enjoying a wonderful Friday and that you have a great weekend. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe and follow. Thanks. Today's episode of Tech and Tequila. I hope you enjoyed our conversation today. To stay updated about all things tech and more, don't forget to visit us at our website, shelbyts.com. If you loved what you heard, remember to show your support by liking, sharing, and subscribing to our podcast. Your 5-star ratings and reviews mean the world to us and help us to reach more listeners just like you. So muchas gracias again for joining us with Tech and Tequila. Thank you so much. You learned a lot about tech, but maybe you had a nice drink of tequila.